Can't hear you.
Could we check the chat, please? Hello? Can you hear me now? Hello, hello. Okay, cool. Thank you. Sorry about that, but my name is Sandra, and I am with my co-interpreter, Annabelle, and we will give you some brief instructions to access interpretation in Spanish. And remember, the session will be also interpreted into ASL. To access the interpretation feature in Spanish, we invite you to please go to the bottom of your screen and then go to the globe icon that says language interpretation, choose English, and do not mute your original audio or you won't be able to hear the main room. We will also give these instructions in Spanish, so bear with us for a little. Buenos días, mi nombre es Sandra, estoy con mi cointérprete Anabel. Vamos a hacer las intérpretes del día de hoy para español y también se va a interpretar esta sesión en lengua de señas estadounidense. Para acceder a la característica de interpretación, haga clic en el globo, icono de globo terráqueo que está en su pantalla. Haga clic en Language Interpretation o Interpretación de Idiomas y elija Español y para activar la interpretación. Si no desea oír el audio de la sala, puede silenciar el audio original. This feature, you will see the button once the feature is activated. Remember that if you're on a Chromebook computer or if you're joining from a phone call, you won't have access to this feature. If you're joining from a mobile device, on your menu, please, on the three-dotted menu that says more, please click and then you will be able to see the option language interpretation, choose English and then press done to activate the interpretation. Once again, do not mute original audio. Si está accediendo desde un dispositivo móvil, puede hacer clic en el menú de 3 puntos que dice More o Más. Elija Interpretación de Idiomas, Español y presione Listo o Done para activar la característica. Esta se activará en cuanto se encienda la interpretación. Y si tienen algún problema para acceder a esta característica, pueden hacérnoslo saber en el chat. If you have any trouble accessing this characteristic, please let us know on the chat and we will be happy to help you. So we are free to activate now the interpretation, and thank you. Please let us know if you have any trouble accessing in the chat.
Thank you so much for that, Sandra. Interpretation. Listen in. Okay. Is it working now? Okay, you're good to go. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for that instruction, Sandra. So just to answer a few questions that come up commonly, we are recording this session and we will be sending you a link within 5 business days following this session. I see you all are doing wonderfully. Hi, Nancy, and using the chat function liberally. We encourage you to do so. Also, you'll be prompted to complete a short survey at the end of this session. We do use the information that you provide there to influence future presentations. So thank you to our interpreters. Thank you for being here today. I'm going to say a quick welcome to today's presenters. We have Miranda Shorts, Lori Jump, Chucho Ruiz, Susanna Rogan, Stephanie Lazaro, and Dr. Clemma Lewis joining us today in today's discussion. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. You should see the presenters here all together. I'll now turn this over to the wonderful Angela and let her take it from here. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gretchen. Wow, how exciting. We're going to start having a conversation. We have an amazing group here of panelists. I'm really excited and thank you for joining. Real quick, what is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month? I'm sure a lot of people know, but For those who don't, every February here at Love is Respect, we bring awareness to Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, right? Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month is held throughout the month to bring together teens, teens and young adults, those who support them in the national effort to raise awareness. Wonderful organizations, schools, nationwide organize efforts to raise awareness. And what it does is it creates a nationwide movement, right? Of passionate, informed individuals, which makes a difference in our young people's lives. So we're excited to announce that the 2024 Teen DVAM, and I'm gonna say that, you may hear me say that instead of Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, is Love Like That. Now, this theme was selected by Love is Respect Youth Council members. And the purpose of the theme is to illuminate what the word that means regarding healthy and unhealthy relationships. We all know that love is more than a feeling. So no matter how you define it, it's so essential to ensure you're on the same page with your partner and the definitions and boundaries of your relationship. So first, I want to give an opportunity for our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves. Take a couple of minutes to introduce yourselves, what organization you're with, and then we'll move into our discussion. That sounds good? And how about we start with Eugenia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Miranda Shorts. My pronouns are she, her, and I am one of the training and technical assistance specialists at Ujima Inc., the National Center on Violence Against Women in the Black Community. I know our title is a bit self-explanatory, but at Ujima, we are committed to ending all forms of violence against Black women and girls. So that includes sexual, domestic, intimate partner violence, institutional violence, system level violence against Black women and girls. But yeah, I'm super excited to be in space with you all. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Dr. Clemma Lewis.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Clemma Lewis. I am the Executive Director of the Women's Coalition of St. Croix. We have been in existence now going on 43 years. I've been with the agency over 40 years, and we provide service for domestic violence and sexual assault victims. We do crisis intervention. We have our own shelters. We have a thrift store. I guess you can call us a wraparound services. We have our own special counselors for the youth. We go into schools and do pretty much presentations and try to do engagement around youth. So I'm happy to be here and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. Next, we're gonna move to Susanna.
Hi, everyone. My name's Susanna Rogan. I use she, her pronouns, and I am with the Workplace and Economic Justice team at Futures Without Violence. So I am actually often doing training and technical assistance for workplaces responding to and preventing gender-based violence and harassment. But I am also leading 20 teenage fellows right now in a project on awareness about teen economic abuse, based on a study that we did in 2021. So be on the lookout for that, but I'm really excited to be in conversation with everyone here today and just be surrounded by so many amazing people.
Thank you, welcome. Okay, Lori.
Hello, everybody. Lori Jump. I'm a citizen of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians. I'm with Strong Hearts Native Helpline, project actually of the hotline. They're one of our fabulous partners. Strong Hearts is a national helpline for American Indian and Alaska Natives that are experiencing or being impacted by domestic or sexual violence. Anonymous and confidential, we take calls from our relatives at all hours of the day or night from across the country. I'm really happy to be here and share space, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Welcome. Stephanie.
Hi, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name's Stephanie. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm a family advocate and safe harbor specialist at Esperanza United. So we're based in St. Paul, Minnesota, and we're a domestic violence agency. We work in the 7-county metro area, and we also have a bilingual crisis line and a small shelter, one of the smallest shelters here in Minnesota. And I have been at the organization for a little bit over 7 years now, and I'm part of both the prevention and intervention team.
Amazing. We love working with all of you all. And last but certainly not least, Chucho.
Hello, everyone. No toca Chucho, Mishpancinco, Mashikalakikan. Just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. My name is Chucho, and I'm calling in from Autumn, Uema territories. It's in southern Arizona, of the Yaqui Opatlamanalca peoples, and I'm here representing the Call to Men. So Call to Men is our organization, has been around for this is our 21st year, right? And we do work to promote healthy and respectful manhood, in the efforts of ending gender-based violence, right? We do a lot of the work around racial and gender justice. And so I'm one of the coordinators for the Healthy Manhood initiatives. And I'm really, really humbled and honored to be here with you all.
We're grateful as well. Thank you. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Angela, she, her, they pronouns. I am the Love is Respect Director. Love is Respect is a project of the National Domestic Violence Hotline. We were established in 2007, and we pride ourselves on being inclusive, diverse, inviting, compassionate supporters of our young people. Because let's face it, they're our future. So let's dive right in, because I'm sure these 375 viewers want to hear our conversation. So I think I want to start with Ujima. What excites you about this theme, Love Like That? And how does the theme tie into the work that you do with young people?
So I think I really like this theme because it kind of has like two meanings. Like you hear people say like, I want to love like that, like using it as a noun. And then also hearing love like that as an action or a verb, to love someone or to love them healthily. I think for young people, the notions of relationships and kind of like what normal relationships look like is really constantly changing. But with that change sometimes comes unhealthy practices that like we might not be necessarily hip or like knowledgeable about yet. But I think that at Ujima, with the work that we do, it's really important that we kind of center what those kind of ever-changing notions of like love and healthy relationships look like, and how we can kind of counteract those unhealthy notions that sometimes come with the changes of relationship status. I think too, what young folks are exposed to in popular culture, for example, is sometimes way different than I think what I even saw when I was in college. And so I think we kind of also have to recognize that relationships in general, again, are changing. And so when we think about things like hookup culture or like talking stages, those can be and often are like relationships that don't fit sometimes into the binary of what we consider a relationship, but within that, those can be just as unhealthy. But anyways, okay, I think I'm really excited about this theme because not only are there two ways to kind of look at it, but during Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month specifically, I think it's a time where we can kind of interrogate those changes and differences and really learn from young people. I think that's my favorite part, is just like learning and being in space. And I guess how that ties into our youth work. I guess I kind of answered that. But I guess it's a two-part answer. Like, what is love? How do we show love in relationships or out of relationships? Because that's important too. How love is portrayed in popular culture. Those are some of the things we work to address at Ujima. And obviously we kind of try to update that language throughout the year, but really honing in on it on a month dedicated to young people is great. And like you said, young people are our future and should absolutely have that dedicated space in this movement and in this community. So that's really exciting to me. I was pretty young when I started doing anti-violence work. And I think like it was really important to me and really awesome to me to be able to work in community with folks who had been doing this work much longer than I had. So I think that's one really special thing about it. But yeah, overall, I just really enjoyed that part about being in space with young people and learning things from them. And
Yeah.
pick up on. So yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think everything you said was amazing, but just remembering that relationships are changing, right? Hookup culture and all these different titles that Gen Z are using, it doesn't necessarily fit in the normal box. Okay, I want everyone to answer this question, so I'm gonna keep moving. Susanna?
Like an apple, the A. I think the thing that excites me the most about it is that it is very youth driven. You really worked with your youth advisory council. And I think that that is the thing that's the most exciting to me about the theme this year. That said, I'm similarly, it's this opportunity for young people to define what love looks like for them rather than adults prescribing what it should look like. And it really opens up the space, especially in a culture right now where we know young people aren't necessarily having as much sex, aren't necessarily interested in relationships in the same way. When we think about those things, it really helps to broaden the conversation about a healthy relationship to friendships, to familial relations, and really helps us understand that love looks different ways in different relationships. So I really love that it keeps that door open for the conversation to keep going. In terms of, how it ties to my work, I think right now our teens are creating, their campaign regarding teen economic abuse. It's under discussed, it's understudied, and it's exciting that they kind of came to a theme that's somewhat similar, in that they opted for create your own universe. And so this idea of like being able to shape your future, being able to shape the relationships that you're in. I think love like that really does allow for that ability to shape and play and learn and grow within that. And knowing
Yeah.
that can shift with who you shift as a person as you get to know yourself. So that ownership and that authorship of self really can be impacted and play with that theme as well.
Thank you. Yeah. We both have the pleasure to work with young people. I mean, our National Youth Council is so amazing. So yeah, and that's another thing that Love is Respect pride themselves on. We're not just youth focused, we're youth driven. Stephanie?
Hi. Yes. So for me, what excites me is to allow for youth to have the space to share of like being in a relationship can bring on like many emotions, and again allowing them to lead the conversations and share the experiences. And during so like how it kind of ties in with my prevention and intervention work is during groups, we start talking about like the forms of abuse, and if they start disclosing or want to share their experiences, being on site to provide ongoing support. Or once I'm already working with the youth, again, talking about like what does a relationship look like. I think a lot of the youth that I've been working with that are newcomers too, that there's like an age gap where many of them have disclosed also like dating older partners, and talking about what like the laws look like here and consent and the healthy boundaries. And so yes, I'm really excited.
Yeah, yeah. Boundaries. Man, that's a topic that young people love to talk about, right? Okay, my friend Lori.
Yeah, looking at this theme, excuse me, what I really like about it is that it's outwardly looking, right? A lot of times our materials or the way we talk is about this is what love is. This is what healthy love is. And I think that by looking outward, we can self-define that. Kids can self-define that for themselves. And it really, is inclusive, right? It's not limiting in any way. It's like that and that and that and that too, right? And so it's all the different ways that love can manifest itself. It's all the different, genders, all the different relationships that kids have today, and they're having them so much younger. And so I really feel like the theme itself is just very inclusive, and rather than limiting as some of our other language can be. So that's exciting to me, right? It really opens the door for everybody, regardless of who you are or what you look like or what your relationships look like. And so I think that that's really great. And I think that for us at Strong Hearts, just again, trying to be inclusive for everybody is always our focus, and trying to reach everybody, regardless of who you are, what you look like, who you love. And accepting your definition of that, I think, is really important. Letting our youth lead the way, really, in these discussions around what love is and what they think it is, not so much what,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, yeah. Letting youth define what love is to them. That's very powerful, Lori. Yeah, we got two more people, but then for the sake of time and sharing time, when I ask questions, we're gonna try to limit it to a couple of minutes so we can move through, because we got some really good conversational items. But so far, y'all been doing good. But next, I'm not gonna leave Chucho last. Go ahead on. How does this theme, excites you about the theme, and how does it tie into your work, Chucho?
Thank you. Thank you so much, y'all. I'm really enjoying what everyone else is sharing. It's sharing a lot of similar sentiments, and thinking about it as it was shared, like that inclusivity, but just letting young people define it. I feel just right now when Laurie was talking, it reminded me of how some folks would refer to young people's like relationships as like puppy love, right? And it's kind of like this subtle way of like just being like minimizing or dismissing like their experiences, right? When we think about those power dynamics in regards to like age. So I love it. I love it because I feel like it's really, yeah, like as you mentioned, Angela, is like youth driven, right? So I love that it's inclusive of the way that they're being able to identify it in their life. And I think for us, it's absolutely, we at a call to men, we talk a lot about the man box, and really that is like where we use that term because it's the limitations and the restrictions, right? That when we define masculinity, and again, like I love what Laurie was saying, because it's like looking at what are those limitations, what are those stereotypes, and what are those like those expectations that there's so much pressure of like, well, I got to do it this way, right? And then if we got to do it this way, right, which looking at how things are constantly evolving, right, like there's a lot of things that traditionally are very harmful, right? And so like you don't really have to do it that way. There's so many different ways that you could do it, right? Be in relationship with folks, different types of relationships, right? And so like I think for us that's one of the things that we bring up, right? Because there's so much of those expectations that have us like boxed in to like, so for me, I'm excited to always have these conversations with young people of like, we don't, and a lot of it is like, how do we take responsibility, right? Like as an adult, I know that I've handed down, things to the next generations of like, you're supposed to do it this way. And even though I wasn't handing out manuals, but everything that I was modeling, right? So that's just kind of it's just I get excited in sharing that, and then I end up learning a lot more than they do probably in that exchange. So
Powerful, powerful. That's, yeah, the box, right? The box. We don't want to be putting people in the box. Last but not least, before we move on to our next question, Dr. Clemmer.
I'll try to keep it, I will keep it short, ditto everything everyone else said. But I just want to add a little culture piece with our children don't go around talking about love here at all. It's not part of the culture. They don't hear it in the house. People not walking around saying, I love you. The definitions are not clear. And so I think this thing, love like that, is going to give us the opportunity from my agency to go into schools, go to the games. We got a big agriculture fair coming up where I can do some kind of contest around what is love? What does that mean to you? How does that make you feel? Because it's not discussed in this community. So we're going to be able to take the thing, we're going to put it out in our social media. We're going to have the conversation. We're going to encourage the parents to have a conversation as well, because they don't even talk about love. So I think when these young people came up with this thing, it was so broad because there's so many different types of relationships. But let's be real. Do we really talk about love in our houses? Do we really talk about it? And what is it? And you're right, it will give them the opportunity to express it. So I'm excited because I think it's going to open some doors that make us more uncomfortable than them. So thanks for that thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. I knew bringing this group together was going to be amazing. Okay, so now I'm going to ask Chucho, I'm going to start with you. So relationships look different depending on the community and cultural context. We was leading up to this. I heard how everybody was talking you're living in. Now, while dating abuse takes many forms, right, and can affect anyone and everyone, the ways it does so may differ depending on circumstances and communities. How does your work center marginalized youth? And what would you want other organizations to know about working with them? Chucho.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate that. I think for us, one of the ways that we've been doing that is we're, over the years with our partnerships that we've had, building our network in different communities, being able to identify, organizations, programs that are working with young people and offering a curriculum. So we use a curriculum that's called the Live Respect curriculum, right? It's coaching, healthy masculinity, and a lot of what's in that curriculum, right? We actually revised it in the last year to include, right, like a more historical analysis, right? And also like what does privilege look like, right? And then like if we're learning about these things, how does that relate to like building, an idea or a notion of allyship, right? So for us, it's kind of like it's really, really important to know that when we're talking about gender-based violence or teen dating violence, right, we know that it's not operating in a silo. We know that it's like connected to all the other multiple forms of oppression, right? So like making sure that we're bringing that awareness. And that was a big part of the reason why we were like, we got to, and that was the feedback that we got about this curriculum, right? We can't just talk about one of the systems, like we got to talk about all of them. So we needed to include those historical pieces, right? And just being mindful everywhere you go, right? Like what are some of the challenges or what could be some barriers, right, that are coming up, and like how are we constantly improving to make it accessible for like all young people.
Powerful, powerful. Stephanie, you want to take on that, Stephanie?
Yes, thank you. So one of the examples I can think of is really being intentional and listening to our youth when we're providing these spaces and working directly with them. For us, it's when we work with our Latino youth, that the realities are different, that not just because they identify as Latino that they are going to face the same barriers and challenges, but that someone who has been probably living in Minnesota versus someone living near the border or different parts of the US, they're facing different realities, and really just providing like the support and tools necessary so we can provide and continue enhancing the work that we do. So again, we let
Yeah, such a good point. Yeah, somebody's just put in the chat, culture plays a big part, right? And identities, right? Sexual orientation. I mean, our young people need to feel safe. Miranda, because I'm just a facilitator. I could jump in and just give you all my points, but I want this to be you all, the amazing panel. What do you think on that question?
Yeah, I think our work at Ujima is culturally specific, and we're centered specifically on ending like violence against Black women and girls and youth. And so I think when it comes to Black girlhood, there are like a vast depth of experiences within that. Like, we're not a monolith, but Black girlhood is so vast and beautiful and expansive. But there are also so many nuances to that. And obviously, like, if that's not your identity, you can't really begin to grasp those experiences as your own. But recognizing that like Black girlhood in its essence and what it means to an identity of someone is really important in the work that like any of us do. And so I think for me, like, Black girlhood and its safety deserves a space. And so I think that's something that we're really committed to, especially when we're thinking about ending teen dating violence, because it starts very early on, right? And so I think that's something that advocates should recognize, is how kind of like Black girlhood can be harmed by a lot of those outside systemic forces. So, I think it starts really early for Black girls, sometimes with like hypersexualization, but also like that hypervigilance and also that lack of care that might come with that. That's kind of working in tandem with those things. And so when we think about like the lack of care awarded to survivors, if that's already established early on, where are they supposed to go? So really creating that safety. Because we kind of want to prevent a building of cultures of silence, which kind of plays into that. So I think really recognizing all of those nuances, I guess both historic and contemporary, like someone has already said, when you're working with young people is so important. I think too, like, being trauma informed is like something it's really drilled into us. We know that that's important. But also like for Black girls, misogynoir starts very young. So we have to think like, how are we receiving or reacting to Black youth who may be survivors of violence? Are we considering all of those things in their totality that they might have been dealing with since they were very young? So again, it's like not just one isolated event of violence, but different forms of violence. So like racism, anti-Blackness, sexism, hyper-identification, those things that they most likely have been dealing with for a long time. So I think that's something that we should really be cognizant of when we're doing this work.
Absolutely. And all of y'all responses, what I'm hearing is it all starts with taking the time to understand the community. Because by understanding and recognizing these concerns or challenges or barriers faced by our young people, we can tailor our strategies and have them informed by the community. And the good news is it'll help create an atmosphere, right, where everyone feels accepted, seen, and valued. That's so important. So now, Lori, so when we're hosting these discussions in community spaces, what is the best way to engage a diverse demographic groups?
There are so many different forms of media, right? And I think you have to use them all, right? Traditional, social media, all of that, and really understanding what populations are using what media. My grandkids tell me that Facebook is for old people, and that's probably true. So what group are you trying to reach, and what social media platforms are they using, right? And then also always trying to remember too that, not every community has access to these things. There are a lot of, when I'm thinking about American Indian, Alaska Native communities that don't have internet, that don't have broadband service, that don't have easy access to this social media. I think also looking at when we're hosting events, if it's during the weekday, during the work week, are we going to hit the people that we need? If it's during, if we're trying to reach our kids, don't host it Monday through Friday before 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? They're in school. Well, hopefully they're in school, right? And so really looking at all of that, the different hours, the different time zones, the different media, it's all so important to make it accessible to as many people as we can. And really just, trying to reach those demographics that are so important to each of our communities.
Mm-hmm. 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 You brought up such good points. Like, we got to go where they're at, right? I seen someone in the chat. Let me tell you, young people on TikTok. I kind of feel like I'm a TikTok celebrity, but I ain't got that many followers. But yeah, we got it. And it's constantly changing, because at one time Facebook was it. At one time Snapchat was it. But yeah. So I'm gonna send that same question to Dr. Clinton.
I'm glad Lori mentioned the social media, because last year I had a group of college students who were interning with me to do a survey with the young people on what kind of media would they listen to, and what would they pay attention to. And it was interesting. They said Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok was their 3 top favorites, which I thought. And so again, it goes back to, we have to go to them. I would say the majority of my staff is definitely over 30, but we try to bring in young people from the universities, from the high schools, from the junior high schools, because they're looking for community service. But one thing I learned about young people, you have to go to them. If you think they're going to come to your agency, or you're going to give these seminars and they're going to show up, you're going to get embarrassed, because we tried that and got no shows. So what we do now is we can go to their games, where they're having the games. We go into schools, because they're a captive audience. They don't have a choice. We do after schools. We do church groups. We partner with some of the sororities and the fraternities, because they have these mentorship groups. So you have a captured audience, but it's a variety of audience. It ain't just one group. So we might go to one of our high schools that's predominantly people with money versus our regular public schools. So we try to mix where we go, even though our community is definitely predominantly 90-some% people of color. There's still different areas, and there's difference in social economic levels. So we try to go to the students, because we've learned if we wait for them, they're not going to come. So we have a big fair coming up in February. I'm not trying to push it on you all, but it's our agriculture fair that we do every year. It's 3 days doing Presidential Week, and people come from all over the world just to be a part of that fair. And the young people, that's where they go to hang out. That's where they go to meet up. That's where they go to click with all their partners. We use that advantage to get surveys, to give them information, do tests, ask them questions, have conversations with them. And just like adults, they love giveaways. So we put a lot of money and time giving them things that we know they're going to like and use. And that's how we reach them. Again, we got to go to where they are. We got to hear that voice and follow them. We can't do what we've done traditionally and think it's going to work.
Amazing. Amazing. I hear echo. Okay, it's gone. Thank you for bringing that point up. Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok, right? But also young people are on YouTube. So keep that in mind as well. So there's an opportunity to have some education pieces on there. Like, we're going to upload this webinar to YouTube, and hopefully, it's just like everybody says, go in there. And community spaces, how do we engage? So if we want to engage with the LGBTQ plus community, I would think we would be at some Pride events, right? If we want to engage with some young men who are looking for positive masculinity, I think love is respect should be partnering with a call to men, which we are. You understand what I'm saying? If we're really looking at the Native American and the challenges that they're having in, whether it's tribal or, because there's a lot of barriers. I've learned a lot of barriers from working with Lori and her team, but we want to team up with people. Esperanza, look at the communities that everyone is specifically working on. We're all doing great work. Miranda, Ujima, I love Ujima from the start. Susanna, economic abuse. That is something that our young people need to be engaged in that conversation because it can affect their future. So we got to start uplifting all of these. I'm sorry, I get on a rant. So now I'm going to ask Susanna the same question.
Yeah.
Would you like for me to repeat it or you got it?
I have them pulled up. I'm cheating.
Okay.
To Lori's point about Facebook, I had to explain to a 16-year-old what a Facebook group is. So I've never felt older in my life in that moment. So, but in addition to the comments about meeting them in these social media spaces, I think it also starts with us doing, as organizations, doing an internal audit. Do we reflect the community that we're trying to reach? And are we actually living into the values that align with the communities that we're also trying to reach? So I think there's first that internal work that needs to be done before we can really fully engage with diverse communities and diverse audiences. I think the other thing is, providing a variety of ways for people to engage in a space. So if you're doing something that's in person, think about doing it as hybrid. Think about adding anonymous ways to ask questions in person so that people can actually engage when they don't necessarily feel comfortable, or if maybe they're, they have a disability and can't necessarily engage in those moments. So thinking more broadly about reaching those communities. I think in addition, having a variety of examples, a variety of representation within the content that you're delivering is another way to really signal who matters. I think for a long time, there's been this move toward gender neutrality. And the difficulty with gender neutrality is that people map on their own experiences when they only hear they, them couples. And what they're doing is they're mapping on cis heterosexual couples. And so we're actually reifying those examples. Whereas if we shifted and made a gender inclusive scenario and examples where we were using different genders, different sexual orientations, different types of coupling, that actually is what expands our thought process beyond cis het normativity. And so I think that even in the examples, the scenarios that we're using, that's another way to signal to our audiences that, we want to engage with everyone. And the final thing I'll say too, well, two final things, sorry. The first is being willing to accept when you're wrong or you don't understand something or you don't know something. I think because we're technically the experts in the room, sometimes we go in thinking we have to have all the answers. And there's something so powerful in being able to say, you know what, I don't know, but I'll get back to you. Or, you know what, I don't know. What do you think? Does anybody else have an answer in here? And I find that that really can involve everyone because, again, it's that they get to come up with the solution together. And then the final thing I'll say is really thinking outside the boxes of where we are. I was at a university working as a prevention coordinator, and I built this really amazing program about accepting rejection. And nobody came because nobody wants to talk about being rejected in love, right? And so I knew that it was a good program. I knew it was something that people need to learn to do. And so I partnered with the Career Center instead. And I said, hey, I've got these really great skills I need to teach, but nobody's going to come talk to them about relationships. Can we talk about like being rejected from a job? And we can teach these things in a different way, but you have a built-in audience that will not come if I do this programming. And so we shifted the language just a little bit, but we were still able to teach those skills and behaviors without people feeling like they had to admit that at some point they would be rejected. So I think there's that, like, really thinking globally about what your partners can look like.
Yeah, yeah. That's deep. Thanks for sharing that. You know, and sometimes we do have to shift, right? You know, I have a healthy obsession with young people. Let me just say that. And it's healthy. And I can say that out loud because I think that the more, and let me just say this, young people crave their parents and older adults leading by example. Did y'all know that? Y'all know that. Yeah, y'all in the prevention spaces. So yes, y'all know that. But also understanding that Gen Z, and I found this out, I already knew it, but it was confirmed working with the National Youth Council that they want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want to be a part of. They're activists and they know their situation the best. So why not ask them? Which is what all of you all have said. Looks like this question really hit. Anyone want to say anything else on this question? Because I know I had it for a few people, but I want to open that space.
I just want to add, in addition to what everybody mentioned, someone did hit the collaboration. So definitely collaborating with different organizations. I know for Esperanza United, we partner up with like our local parks, our Dakota County parks, the Girl Scouts, and by also hearing the community and youth and their families, they brought up of we used to we do the overnight camps for our girls for the previous years, and as of last year, after listening to the youth, they said, why not the boys? So as last year we had our first boys overnight camp. So I just want to say how important it is to maintain that collaboration with other organizations and allowing them and inviting them to these spaces so because they all deserve like these opportunities and be able to have these experiences. It's a culture thing where parents wouldn't let young girls spend the night with friends, and so just inviting them again, have these conversations, listen to their concerns, and it's also like an honor for them to let them participate and also have like community events like at the park, not just youth, but also families. Sometimes childcare can be a barrier for parents to participate. So a lot making it inclusive of their whole family, not just okay, only girls or only men or just youth, but making it as a family. And also food and incentives. Youth love food. So food and some sort of
they love music too.
Yeah.
So we need to pause for a brief second. We're having a little problem with little technical difficulty with our interpretation.
Yeah, so sorry, everyone. Vicky, I think Autumn needs you to switch. Thank you.
Okay, this is a great conversation. How everybody feeling, panelists? And y'all brought up a good point. Like we need to collaborate. Thank you, Stephanie. My tongue gets twisted. I'm from Louisiana. I humbly apologize. But the collaboration, and that's why Love is Respect is having our first ever TDVAM kickoff webinar, and we're all here present, right? We're doing it. We're leading by example. So it's amazing. So are we clear as far as technical difficulties? Can we move on to our next question? That's a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So our last and final question, and this is going to go out to absolutely every one of our panelists. And we kind of touched on it. Y'all kind of touched on it with your responses to some previous questions. But we know that they're all forms of gender-based violence disproportionately impacts women and girls. What are some forms of gender-based violence you identify when working with youth? And Susanna, we're gonna go with you first. Susanna. Apple, I got it.
You're all right. I will answer to both. That I stared at that question for a while when we got the questions, because that's such a big question. And I was hoping to not have to go first. So
I'm sorry.
It's totally fine. I'm just kidding. I think one of the things that really I thought about a lot when looking at this question was, it's not necessarily what I identify. It's actually what the youth that I'm working with identify after going through a session, or after learning something new, or doing some reflection. And that, I think, that can be some of the most difficult, but also most necessary work that we do, is helping youth really understand what should not be just tolerated, that they can expect more from their relationships, and that they have the capacity to learn and grow and change and be everything that they need to be. And so I think, like, well, yes, I could identify, like, we are working with teens who have experienced economic abuse through our work. You know, we've seen kind of the full gamut of behaviors, and heard about the behaviors of dating violence, of sexual violence within teenage populations, and stalking, because we romanticize stalking as a culture. And so I think, you know, for me, it's laying that out and not naming anything for them, but allowing them to put a label on something if they've learned something new. And so I think that's the answer I have. I think, you know, to add to the learning and growing piece, the thing that really surprised me with one of our cohorts, so we have two different cohorts. One is based in the Bay Area, and one is based in Charlotte, North Carolina. And one of the Charlotte cohort was really interested in doing education that focused on people who were causing harm, because they really wanted to believe that somebody could change and do better and have a more positive relationship if they just knew what the harm was that they were causing. And so I thought that, like, that I feel like is indicative of this generation as well, is they're really interested in, you know, transformation and restoration and restorative practices. So I think that that's just another piece that's been so amazing with the work that we're doing. And by we, I meant everyone.
Absolutely. And it's, you know, it's the other side of the coin. We can't just address, you know, people who may be experiencing unhealthy relationships or even dating abuse. We also need to get in ahead of people who are choosing to cause harm, whether that's lack of education, lack of, somebody brought it up, I think it was Dr. Clemma, about not having role models, not being told I love you, or, you know, don't get me started on the social norms about men are not supposed to cry, they're not supposed to be soft. You know, all this misinformed information that's been presented over the years and over the generations, kind of like what Lori said, we got to change the narrative, right? We just got to change the narrative. So thank you for that. Chucho, you ready?
Yes.
You let me know if you want me to repeat the question.
Oh no, thank you, Angela. I think for us a lot of it is I appreciate what folks are sharing. I think for us, a lot of it is speaking to the collective socialization that is happening, right, around, whether it be race, whether it be gender, and then it's kind of like unpacking that, like what are some of the harmful, subtle messages, right, and being able to kind of identify these are the things that have historically been harmful and they've had impacts, right? Whether they've been our intentions or not, right? These are the harmful impacts of them. So being able to for them to be able to identify that, right? As once we start talking about the socialization and how subtle and pervasive it is in our cultures, right? So being able to speak to that in a way that brings it back to like power and control, right? How are all these things that are not necessarily illegal, right? But all these are like tactics, right, that are like harmful and abusive, right? So how are we able to identify them, right? And in a way that we acknowledge and recognize like our complicity oftentimes in that, right? Like, man, I do all these things all the time, or like, or I've experienced this, right? But then also like, okay, so what do we do with that, right? Like, what are ways to do it differently, right? Because we didn't know that, the impacts of it, or we never considered it, right? So I think for us, it's like one of the biggest things is that we'll talk about, right? Like, how are all these things teaching? How are all these messages teaching? Like, if we're talking about ideas of manhood and masculinity, right? That's specific, like gender. If we're looking at gender, what is it teaching boys about girls, right? What is it teaching boys about like femininity, right? What is it teaching boys about sexual orientation, right? And there's a lot of like the devaluing, the degrading, the dehumanizing, the objectification, and so all of those things, like, how is that part of the fertile ground of like some of the overt violence that is happening, right? And I think for it's a lot of the work is really around the collective socialization, right? Because it's like, how do we find it in that, right? Because it's like the water, right? And we're swimming in it. So it's kind of like, how do you how do you tell a fish that they're wet, right? If that's a thing, right? Because some people push back on that too. But really that, right? Just kind of looking at all the pieces that aren't necessarily, you know what I mean? Some people don't even consider that abusive or harmful or violent, right? But all those are contributing factors, right, of why it exists, right? Why the numbers are so high, right? It's so scary. It's like an epidemic, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I'm getting, whoo, this is a deep conversation. Like this is really helping. Hopefully it's helping the audience because it's definitely helping me. And 1 in 3 teens, we ain't gonna even talk about the stats, experience unhealthy relationships or dating abuse, right? And relationships exist on a spectrum from healthy to abusive. But that prevention space is addressing that unhealthy piece. Like, let's talk about the warning signs. Let's talk about, even though it might seem amazing that you're getting all these gifts and they're wanting to marry you in a week, or they want, all of these different examples. Let's talk about how movies and let's say it, pop culture, social media, romanticize unhealthy relationships. Let's really have these conversations, right? Let's talk about all that. Yeah, we're gonna have to do another one, y'all. All right, Stephanie, you ready?
Yes, I think I'm thinking about a couple. I think some of the things that not necessarily, well, yeah, I can identify as growing up, it's paying attention and listening to others, like body language too. Sometimes when working with youth, they might not not feel comfortable. We in our culture, we do the hugging and the kissing, and I remember I did not like that. So it was something that was challenging to have these conversations. Like, you're not being disrespectful or rude, but it's just having again, I'm going to go back to like a little bit about boundaries on what what a healthy and unhealthy relationship may look like, and normalizing. I remember working with a teen mom, and she mentioned something like, well, I have to have sex with my partner because that's kind of like my job, my role, my duty. So again, it's like you can still be a survivor, victim of like sexual abuse, even if it's through your partner or and I think this is just kind of something what came to mind on working with youth. And again, it goes back to like consent and the boundaries, and how do you I think Susanna mentioned a really important part where she said allowing them to label it until they're ready. So I really just want to tie in that with that, my answer.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you. You brought great perspective. Now we're gonna move on to Lori. She looked like she's jumping to say something.
Yes, I certainly am. I think about one of the things that I think about most often with our youth is the emotional or psychological abuse that they experience. And I think that they don't realize the impact that it has on their lives, right? It's almost continual. I can remember my brother had 5 daughters, and when they were teens, excuse my language, but they called each other bitch, like all the time, like all the time. And they said that you are not being nice to each other. Oh, Lori, right? And so I think number one, the terminology that we use, that our kids use, I think just the impact of the emotional abuse, that it's so prevalent in our school systems. What might start out as might be viewed as bullying, but it continues into relationships, and just that continual onslaught. I think of the things that people say to you, that as an adult, we can, like water on a duck, right? Let it go. It's not so easy as kids. They take it to heart, and it builds and it impacts. And I think that really having more resources around that is really important. It's something that, I know that we want to develop more in our social media and our online presence, is some of those resources around, the impact that what you hear makes an impact on your life, right?
Yeah, yeah. I get that. I get that. And it's weird, right? Yeah, we do need to have another webinar. Somebody asked, Angela, do we need to have another one? This is a great panel, right? Yeah, but normalizing what's not okay before young people even get in a relationship, right, Lori? That's what you're saying, right? Yeah, yeah. I get it. I get it. Miranda?
I think folks pretty much said what I was going to say, but I kind of took this in a different light, because I kind of thought about examples of like what we've seen, and I thought a lot about like grooming and trafficking, and how like trafficking happens. But when you're dating someone, your partner can traffic you. And like thinking of like, I think one of the most examples of that being Centoya Brown, like, are we making space for people to like recognize that some of these relationships aren't particularly healthy? So that's one. But I thought one of the biggest examples for me was like stalking, and how again like we have kind of romanticized stalking, and it takes so many different forms now. And I think a lot of people are used to it being like somehow like someone following you in person, but cyber stalking is such a big issue, because of I think almost how insidious it is. So like I think about like using technology, creating new Instagram accounts and constantly spamming them with messages. Checking their following account is a really big one. Like if they've blocked you through text message, maybe like emailing them. And I know like I see TikToks all the time, like not to age myself, but I see TikToks all the time of like people being like, oh, he blocked, like I blocked him on everything, and now he's emailing me like this is true love, like we must be meant to be. And I'm like, that's not like what that means. And like if people think this is silly, it is sometimes really serious. And to talk about boundaries again, like I think this is a clear-cut example of crossing boundaries. And if they're crossing boundaries here, they're most likely crossing boundaries somewhere else too. And I was just thinking about this too, people who cause harm kind of co-opting the language that we use in this space, like boundaries. I feel like, is it boundaries or is it coercive control? Like, what are we really talking about here when we're talking about boundaries? And so how are we mitigating that type of language being used in that violent way? So yeah, I also don't think it's necessarily really realistic to tell young people to get off social media, but I think there are ways to empower young people to use social media safely, and like, how are we creating safe spaces online? So yeah, I think those are the biggest things, but not to toot our own horn, but I think Gen Z is really receptive to that stuff. So I think we just have to get really creative on those kind of covert forms of violence. But that is the last thing I will say.
Wow, you really brought up some key perspectives. Like, yeah, the chat is going crazy. Dr. Liam, bring us on in.
Jenny,
You
let me
gotta
see
unmute.
enough for me to say. So what I thought about when I saw the gender-based thing, the first thing I thought about is this issue we had here with these girls letting these boys take pictures of them nude or taking pictures of the top and then using it to get them to have sex by sending it out to all the kids in the school and everybody making fun of them. And that's a big issue. Or the guys on the football team and the basketball team that's having sex with the girls and sending them out to show the fellas that they scored. Or the guys here who actually had a black book and they have I don't know what it were, a contest on how many could score enough virgins. And all of this is violence against girls, of course, and young women. But when I look at the other part as a mother of sons, and we don't just work with girls, we work with boys as well. I think about the music as well. And we haven't said much about that, but the language and the disrespect when I mean, like Lori said earlier, excuse the word bitch, but I mean, that's like a household word now. It's in all the music, it's in all the language. And we can't say that music is not impacting the young people. Everywhere they go is playing it. They driving these cars here and they got these double speakers. So the music is disrespecting and blasting. So my concern about the whole gender-based, but it is mostly focused on females. But I'm also seeing a lot of violence against same-sex young people couples, young people who have decided that maybe they don't want to be a girl or boy, and they're being attacked. We've actually had one of our teenagers killed because his decision was to be a female. So I'm also seeing more of that violence as well against sexual orientation. We got a lot of work to do with gender violence. We need to label it so they can understand it. We real nice. We use the word bullying, but you know that's gender-based violence. I mean, all our schools here, if you came to the Virgin Islands, you'll see these big signs, no bullying. Well, we got at least 3 elementary school where we had kids try to commit suicide because they were bullied as girls based on how they look. So this comes close to home and really hit me because we've had a lot of issues around gender-based violence here in the territory. So we definitely got more work to do around that.
That just broke my heart. But thank you for sharing it. But these stories let you know, just like she said, we got more work to do. I want to thank my panelists. Like, we went in, and when I say we went in, we talked about some topics that you don't hear talked about, right? As much, right? But the conversation doesn't stop here. Tomorrow starts the Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. Tomorrow starts Black History Month. Tomorrow starts, isn't it, Stalking Awareness Month? Am I correct? It's not? Okay, that's this month. Y'all can talk and help me. Don't have me.
Oh, sorry. I was just,
Yeah.
this month was not.
That's what I meant. Okay. Okay. But also understanding that, yes, we have months designated for different awareness, like May is Mental Health Awareness Month. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. June is Pride Month. But why we can't all come together and lead by example and just share this awareness every day? And then it'll be like a domino effect. All these organizations on here are doing great work, right? There's no excuse for us not to get educated, get in touch with our biases, right? We all have them, right? Whether it's because of the way we raise, because of our sexual identity, because of our religious beliefs, whatever the case may be. But listening to be able to hear who we're serving and not trying to tell them. That's going to inform our work, and that's going to help move us forward. Because like every panelist just said, it's ever changing. So I want to give y'all a little information about Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. We have a lot of events coming up. If you want information about Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, we're doing 3 IG Lives. We got another webinar, our annual webinar, where we'll be joined by our youth council members. So excited. You can go to loveisrespect.org, right? Go up in your right-hand corner, click on Get Help, and you'll see Teen DVAM information right there with the time, the topics, and everything. Also, Love is Respect and the National Domestic Violence Hotline is a 24/7, totally confidential service, right? We're here 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24/7. Our expert advocates are there not only to help our survivors, people who support survivors, people who support our young people, and our young people, right? Also, a big thing is Respect Week. If you don't know already, that's the second week in February. But again, when you go to our website, you'll be able to see all that information. And that first Tuesday, which is February the 6th, if I'm not mistaken, I apologize if I got it wrong, is Wear Orange Day. So let's light up social media with orange. Let's really get involved and spread awareness. Pass it in your communities. I want to thank you again, panelists, and I hope to join and share space with you all soon. Everybody have a good day. And it's over. Congratulations.
Thank
Thank
you all.
y'all.
Thank you all. Be
We
safe.
will upload this on our YouTube channel. We'll let you all know. This was a great conversation. I foresee and on the part 2, because I think we really hit on some really good topics. I think that I did a great job choosing the panelists, and I hope you all learned from each other.
Yes.
Chucho, I know you was the only man, but you brought it in.
I appreciate y'all. I'm humbled and honored to be amongst you all. Thank you. And I did learn a lot. So
Me too.
I appreciate you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Angela.
you.
Thank you.
Everybody go ahead and leave so we can stop the recording.